A Woman is a Woman Until She is a Mother. Essays by Anna Prushinskaya. Narrated by Exie Sands.
Love letter to woody plants. To the woman in the parking lot of the park who has found me crushing leaves, smelling them, and looking at the willows. I am giddy because I have identified a poison sumac. It grows on the trail by the water. They happen in southeastern Michigan, and here are some ways to tell. Shrub or small tree, leaflets compound, sessile, with scarlet midribs, droops white, persisting in winter. I have been learning the names of woody plants this fall thanks to a special course at the college in town, a historic course. And sometimes I am overwhelmed with the trees. The distinctions between oaks, the tips of their leaves sometimes bristled, their buds sometimes tomentose, their acorns brimmed with fringe, where they are and aren't on a hill. And the maples. Something like Acer, the graduate instructor says of them, meaning something common, mundane, easy to define. Silver, red, sugar, and box elder, they do their own thing. Thankfully, the hawthorns one cannot distinguish, by the species at least. They have a thorny, suckering habit. They are part of one another. It is true that they have thorns and haws. The shrubs that creep and climb beneath I had not noticed, the vines with their special lifestyle, a specialist explains. They adapt, survive in high winds, have structures. Sometimes they smother. They get a bad rep. A man comes to talk about soil, its microbiome with elements that outnumber stars. He throws acorns at the students to get their attention. A student asks how we could count the stars. The man explains. I drive to somewhere by Highland Township and towards Detroit and to the border with Ohio to find the right plants. There are places in Ann Arbor I had not considered, the glacial features. The forest changes. A place that felt common, felt familiar, is not the same place. I've only visited the class for weeks, which is to say I know not much at all. Still, that is all it takes to make the forest strange and lovely. A place to touch and explore. Often the forest is a backdrop. Now, as I walk and scan the paths for bark patterns and then the understory, the leaves on everything, the way they move with the wind, I become the backdrop to the forest. By the end, my senses are exhausted, and I listen. It is the time of year when I can hear the acorns drop, a time of year I hadn't noticed until now. I am not particularly spiritual, but I quiet. I think once I was an addict. Maybe I still am. In the Mary Carr memoir, Lit, she conveys a familiar situation. When in traffic, inching bit by bit, we don't think of ourselves as it. Traffic is the other humans. Prickles, spines, thorns. I touch plants with all of them. Some things are structural. What else can we learn from the woods at a time when we need to learn from something more than ever, I think, too sincerely? I crush leaves, I rub at bud scales. The saying that encapsulates advice for winter identification after the leaves have dropped. Trust the bud. My instinct is to walk away from the forest, the way it's changed me in weeks. My instinct is not to trust it. I am hoping, instead, to find a place where I can. The woods in town, perhaps. Does it help to know this was written while I was pregnant? Being portal. That writing was sincere, its bud descriptions and all. I was worried about revealing fondness for woody plants. What a strange thing to worry about at 3 a.m., a time when I am awake now, often, thinking in excited ways. I am pregnant, that is. 7 months or so. I am at the point that I have heard about, the point at which suddenly one feels very pregnant. That is, it is the experience of some women I've spoken with that the process is not gradual, the realization of it, in the way that fetal development is. Of the things that one hears about while one is pregnant, few are applicable. When the exterminator at the office notes that I am small for how far along I am, for example, I don't put much stock in that. Or the banjo teacher who explains his wife's epidural, when and how it went. Or the man who does Tai Chi who asks about the date of the splash landing. His parents coined the term in the 60s, having watched the astronauts on TV. Now the baby's movements can be seen by anyone. I can hide in very large sweaters. Sometimes I choose to hide. During Alice Walker's talk, I wear a taut top and see him stretch. His hands might be behind his head, my stomach like a hammock. I can feel his top and his bottom at the same time, something I hadn't felt before. The point is the baby is a boy. I had no expectation of the baby's sex prior to the pregnancy, as far as I could tell. Though, now that the baby is a boy baby, I think about the implications. Alice Walker speaks at Hill Auditorium, the large, historic, acoustically excellent concert hall at the University of Michigan. It was built to fit the whole student body, as it was in 1913. Famously, a pin drop on the stage can be heard anywhere in the auditorium. While the details of midterm elections do not matter, it is the day after them, and people are disappointed. Alice Walker stands behind a large wooden lectern, which has also hosted Martin Luther King Jr., Hillary Clinton, etc. I have been trying to be a good citizen. I have been trying to be informed. I have been trying to do so, especially since I could vote, which was in 2008 when I naturalized. My family arrived in the U.S. in 1998, and before that, St. Petersburg and Moscow, the Russia of the falling apart, and before that, Uzbekistan, its cotton and its Aral Sea. Alice Walker says of the elections to the disappointed college town crowd of 3,000 that elections do not matter much. One should think larger, think more imaginatively, about the world, about the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant disaster, the radiation still moving, and the environment, the way nature intends to crumble within the near future, she suggests. Why desecrate the ability to vote when that ability is sacred, Alice Walker asks, or something like it, in my understanding of her view. The things that people go through to get the right to vote, do not waste the sacred vote on evil. This is contentious. Alice Walker espouses womanism, the world as organized and run by mothers and women. The man is in the best place he could be, the middle, surrounded by mothering energy, female energy. But the point is also that he likes it there, in this Alice Walker world. I think about my body. My belly surrounds something male with its physical barrier, which I think is why I listen carefully. Also, there is a connection with Russian literature. After the talk, I read the biography of Alice Walker, in which she recalls a trip to the Soviet Union. I was so ignorant of history and politics when I went to Moscow and was taken on a stroll across Red Square. I could not fathom for the longest time who the Russians were queuing up to view in Lenin's tomb. He is still preserved. In 2016, the New York Times followed up with Lenin, reporting on the costs of keeping up the body, polling Russians on whether it was worth it. And yet she had fallen in love with the literature. Yevtushenko and Akhmatova, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. I read all the Russian writers I could find, as if they were a delicious cake. They made me think that Russia must have something in the air that writers breathe from the time they are born. I think to myself, despair? What then to make of bringing a baby into the world when the best Alice Walker, the woman sufficiently hopeful to espouse womanism, could muster is hope for an apocalypse in this, our lifetime? She seems certain that the apocalypse will be the nuclear flavor, and in the winter that follows, there will be rebuilding, a recovery over generations of motherism, of thinking bigger, of hope. Hope, Alice Walker says, never to covet thy neighbor's house, because then not peace but war. The house shelled for some purpose, the house no longer their house, but shards. Hope never to say yes to their misery. When I became pregnant, I thought about this question vaguely. The question of whether, on balance, the things that come with life are worth it. Now I am irreversibly pregnant, and I still wonder about birthing into an often and for many horrible world. In her best Anne Lamott manner in Operating Instructions, a memoir about her son's first